I'm Alex Hirsch, the boss of Gravity Falls.
I'm Michael Rianda, the sidekick of Gravity Falls. Let's be honest, people.
And this is Boss Mabel. Chip Acker's really dumb joke. That came from, we did an episode, I think in Fight Fighters, we wanted to have them gambling, and they said we couldn't use poker chips. So I think I told one of the board artists, like, we can't use poker chips, let's use crackers. And they were like, they somehow thought that I meant chip crackers. It was one of these weird, making diamonds from that pressure. So this episode, it came from a few things. I mean, I think the main thing was I wanted to do a Stan Mabel episode.
Yeah.
We didn't see a lot of episodes that were about Stan and Mabel have such a different life perspective. It seemed natural that at some point they would get to a major conflict.
Totally.
And then probably the other point of inspiration for this episode was just like me and Mike dealing with the pressures of leadership for the first time in our lives. Like, probably particularly me.
It was mainly Alex. I was like, I got to be good cop all the time. Like, you guys are great. Goodbye. And Alex had to be like, okay, how do I actually make this thing?
Yeah. So like when you're like the boss of a team, particularly if they're your friends and people you like, there's this constant tension between wanting to be everyone's friend and wanting them to like you, and also seeing what needs to be done and needing to ask for it.
Yeah.
Me and Mike sort of discovered this dynamic of good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Where I would kind of be the guy who came in with a lot of notes, who was, very direct. And Mike would be the kind of like, hey, soften the blow. We still love you.
Yeah. I was like, well, maybe we could do this. I always pitch my things like, aren't I a stinker?
And I do remember there was something that we were running into where, the show was hard, and I think a producer had suggested, can we make the type of the scripts single space instead of double spaced, so the script seems shorter to convince people it's easier to work on them? And I said,
What?
That's the worst idea I've ever heard.
I don't even remember that.
No, that was suggested to me. They're like, is there a psychological way to make it seem easier? And I was like, that is... Well, it's the kind of thing, like, it's sort of a Mabel idea.
Yeah.
It's like, what if it looked easier?
Yeah.
But it's not really easier.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea of Mabel kind of learning some of the lessons that, I was learning in show running of it's hard to be friends and be the boss, and sometimes being direct is the kinder way to run a business.
Yeah.
Not as far as Grunkle Stan. He obviously is a terrible boss. But, they both have something to learn from this episode.
I like the bad lady comic joke.
That's so much of Mabel's personality, kind of doing these little bits and kind of like, I'll be here all night, folks.
Yeah.
Definitely came from the time we just spent in the booth with Kristen Shaw.
Yeah.
She's so funny. She was often doing bits and we couldn't tell when she was and wasn't.
Yeah.
She's like a lot smarter than we are.
Yeah, she's hilarious. Every
and-
time because it's like sometimes you've got a reading. Oftentimes when you're writing this stuff, you have a reading in your head, and sometimes you're like, oh well, we got it, and sometimes we didn't get it. But every time with Kristen, it was like 10 times funnier than we could have imagined, just because she's just so naturally funny.
Yeah. I gotta give our writer on this episode, Tim McKeown, a lot of credit for. There was a lot to figure out in this episode about the stakes and Stan going to Cash Wheel and how does their bet work.
Yeah.
And that stuff, when you do it right, it feels like, oh, that's pretty simple, but it's not. It's rarely simple.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because this is one of those scripts that felt, it was like sometimes the scripts were really hard and you had to write 20 different versions of them, but this is one where kind of the first draft was working because it's such a traditional sitcom structure.
It's a traditional sitcom setup. There's not like some deep mystery, some major drama to it. You just laughed at the same time Stan laughed at that joke.
I like a person getting attacked and screaming.
I think this was a Tim idea. The idea of Seuss wanting to be this mascot. Do the question dance. We also like the idea that Seuss has a very simple dream that he absolutely is not capable of accomplishing. That Stan was right to tell him to give up on his dream. Seuss, you're in over your depth here. Dancing and being a question mark. You can't handle it.
Well, and one thing about this episode that it was interesting because it was like easy to do because it was a traditional sitcom structure. But I think like that was one of the things where people felt like, oh, this doesn't feel Gravity Falls-y like the other ones, even though it's like funny and it works as an episode because it doesn't have that mystery element.
It does feel a bit more like, there's a sliding scale of Gravity Falls where, on one end of the scale it's X-Files and the other end of the scale it's like, just like, it's like a sitcom like The Simpsons. And this is definitely closer to the sitcom scale. And like, we were experimenting with that stuff. We were experimenting with tone. Sometimes we would get a little frustrated. We'd say, this doesn't feel like Gravity Falls yet.
Yeah.
I think this was an episode where in script I was a little worried that this wasn't Gravity Falls-y enough. But I remember when we pitched it to the crew and stuff, I mean, people enjoy getting to spend time with the characters.
Yeah.
And this is probably the first time we actually spent time seeing how the business of the Mystery Shack actually operates in the entire show. It's weird that it came so late in the season, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and the sorry, I just got caught up watching the show.
Mike's, well, this is, I mean, so every episode, this is, another little writer's tip. I mean, conflicts are only as important as their stakes, and stakes are only as important as how personal they are to the characters. So we knew that this was an episode with very low stakes. It's just who's going to be the boss of the shack. We don't really believe Mabel's going to be the boss.
Yeah.
So in order to care, you have to set up personal stakes. The idea that if Mabel loses, she's going to have to wear a loser shirt all summer. Mabel cares about sweaters and fashion and would hate wearing a loser shirt. So that's real stakes for her. Yeah. And for Stan, the idea that he have to record a tape apologizing. He's such a prideful guy. The idea that you have to sing an apology song, like, we kind of can't imagine him singing that song, and we can't imagine Mabel wearing a loser shirt, so we're compelled.
Yeah, totally. I like her gigantic shoulder pads here.
That was shoulder pads were very important to this episode. Half of this was just like, I remember like drawing on a napkin, like, what if Mabel had big shoulder pads and was the boss? Like, half of this episode was just an excuse to get her in this stupid outfit.
And one thing, speaking of just, Alex talking about stakes, it's an interesting thing with the kid show too, because, in a movie or something, you could have stakes, you could have life or death stakes in it. But in a kid show, you kind of have this inherent sense that, like, we're not going to kill off any of the characters. So sometimes you actually care more about lower believable stakes.
Social stakes.
You care more about social and personal stakes than you do about big end of the world stakes or life or death stakes, because you kind of sense in a kid show that you're not really going to kill anybody.
Yeah.
That
that Selves joke, that's a Tim McKeown joke.
That cracked us up. I remember like laughing super hard about that in the room.
Did you write her saying "now rap with me" while flipping the chair backwards like Dangerous Minds?
Maybe. I think I had very little to do with this episode.
Yeah.
Like, I remember trying to punch it up, but nothing really sticking.
The question mark? I wish this was an exclamation point to show how excited I am.
As for you, Dipper, die, wolf costume!
There's a lot of Mabel screaming "die, die" in this season.
Yeah, we tried to like make jokes I remember that was the thing, we tried to make jokes as hard as possible, so we would always be pushing Disney to have like die, or we found we couldn't use the word murder even though we wrote it in like every episode, because it would make a joke funnier because it was a harder punchline, but we ended up not being able to use the word for some reason.
That's a Mike line. Do you know how money works?
Yeah.
Right? Where she says, like, we're going to make $600 billion by the end of the day.
And it was nice we were always trying to look for opportunities to give Wendy more personality, because, sometimes, like, we felt like she got a little bit underserved, so we were always trying to, like...
She got 100% underserved. Yeah. One of my biggest regrets is that we weren't able to crack a full Wendy episode.
Yeah,
if I ever made, like, a special of Gravity Falls, I'd make sure she had an important plot.
That's Carter That's a character of Carter Sholin, one of our production people, who's a delight.
This when the actress who came in to sing this song did such an amazing job.
Yeah, this is like one of the best days, because it's like hearing someone with chops like this
so good
sing lyrics this dumb was like incredibly satisfying.
So like Brad Breek, who is our composer, we would often say the script calls for a song, and he'd often write good lyrics.
Yeah.
But we'd be like, this is good lyrics for like a song on the radio, but it doesn't feel like the characters. So then we would write really dumb lyrics. The lyrics to that song were, "Come on, girls, show them boys, shoulder pads, Mabel's the boss now.
Make that money.
Make that money. Like, that's all she's saying. But she's singing it with so much heart and soul.
Yeah,
She really
totally.
brought it to life.
I remember trying. This is.
My lines, and his costume is more.
I forget who did these boards, but this was. This is a tremendous character design.
Mabel saying Imaginize is we're kind of joking around Imagineers, that kind of thing. Believe in yourself. Oh, I'm so cold in this costume.
I think also we kind of got a little bit of an inflated episode or idea of how well this episode would go over because we were showing it to a bunch of people in a workplace setting.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, "This is relatable," but then like the Tumblr kids were like, "I don't know, this one's all right."
Billy, your face is ruined. I think that's a Mike line. Your face is ruined made me laugh so hard. Like, his mom has just given up on the idea that she'll ever help. It's too late now for Billy's face after this. No, yeah, that's true. I feel like this episode is not often remembered at the, when people are talking about most memorable Gravity Falls episodes. I think because even though like it does what it does like serviceably well and is kind of cute and funny, like it doesn't do what's most unique to Gravity Falls, which is that mix of mystery and adventure. Even though it's fun to see Seuss get maced in the face.
We were always pushing to have more pain from the characters. It's like, can the character be in more pain? Can they scream louder and harder?
We love the idea of Stan having a minute to Stan having a context where we want to see him be his worst self.
Yeah. Totally. And seeing his like big brash personality in like a setting that everyone can understand, because the Mystery Shack is a little bit ungrounded or whatever, because it's like he's in his world of his characters, but seeing him out in the outside world is like a funny weird.
It was we really we enjoyed the fact that he's as awful as ever. And he's rewarded for it. Yeah. We like those anti-morals where Stan uses his terribleness to succeed incredibly well. Little weird little note. When Stan's wearing his lot of nudity in this episode. When Stan's wearing his like floral print shirt, the blue shirt with the gold chain, that's a very specific outfit from Breakfast with Blassie. Nobody watching this will know what I'm talking about. Look it up. If Andy Kaufman does this weird movie documentary where he's interviewing a pro wrestler for like an hour, and it's very surreal comedy. Freddie Blassie, King of Men, was just this sort of like hairy man's man character, the kind of guy Stan would like.
Yeah, would like look up to.
Honey, you can see the strings.
What? Those aren't strings, that's body hair.
The Gremloblin was a late addition to this episode because we needed something magical.
Yeah, totally. And because that was the thing that like we were pushing early on. We're like, what if there's an episode without any magic? Wouldn't that be crazy? And it turns out it just didn't feel like the show. It felt like a different show.
Yeah. Well, and in Gobblewonker, when the magic wasn't real, everyone was like bummed out.
Yeah.
Like I came to Gravity Falls for some real magic and mystery.
Yeah.
And this episode, we were like, oh shoot, there is no magic in this. We need a monster. Somebody said a goblin. I was like, it's Gravity Falls. It can't be just a goblin. Make it dumber. It's a Gremloblin. What's a Gremloblin? That's up to the designers to decide.
And that was one thing that Alex was always pushing, was that like he's always like, we're making a promise with the theme song of the type of show that this is going to be.
Yeah.
And if we're not living up to that, it's going to be a disappointment. Because even if the thing is great, if you're expecting something else, you're not going to be satisfied.
This was a late idea, the idea that Mabel lets out the... It used to be that the Gremloblin just went loose for no reason, and you want every turn in a story to come from the character. Yeah, so the idea that Mabel gave him a 5-minute break because she's such a good boss, like that made the episode work a lot better.
Yeah.
Because this whole episode is about her learning that if she is just so nice to everybody, things are going to go chaotically wrong.
Yeah, that's often a thing that can make the story feel untethered and something that we always fought against. Even though we know these rules, it's like you'll forget just because you're trying to go for a joke or something that something happens randomly, and it's always better when the character is responsible for the things that are going wrong in the episode.
Yeah, the character should deserve in some way the comeuppance they get.
Yeah.
And not deserve because they necessarily did something wrong, but because there's something they need to grow to understand better. This Grimloblin, I'm pretty sure we were just like, can it look exactly like the monsters from Gummy Bears? I think that's what we wound up with. There was, it was very important to us to constantly find a balance between mundane and magical.
Yeah.
So when the monster's in the shack, it's really important that he is breaking things. It's important that he has these stickers. Like, what are little things to contrast how big he is?
Yeah, or he's like pressing Big Mouth Billy Bass. Because that's another thing too. You want to make it. It's interesting when a fantastical creature is dealing with like
something
the
mundane and
detritus
normal.
of normal life, like a fast food container or Big Mouth Billy Bass.
Yeah, that's why the Singing Salmon was literally just invented because it felt so ungrounded that this monster was in the shack that we needed something dumb that would only be in a tourist trap for the guy. So something specific for him to be interacting with. Yeah. It has no plot relevance. It's just textural. This gag that you look into the Gremloblin's evil eye and you see your worst fear, and Dipper uses it against him, and his worst fear is to be his own father. That to me was like, I was like, oh, that's like low hanging fruit. Like, that's the most obvious thing that your fear should be, is becoming your father.
This is still like my favorite joke of the entire series.
And I remember Mike lost his mind at that joke.
Yeah, well, you were like considering cutting it out. I was like, never. You have to keep this in.
Many years later, my dad was like, so your worst fear is becoming your father. Like, seeing this episode, he was like thinking there was some deep psychology inside of it. I'm like, no, I mean, that's the obvious go-to place for this joke, isn't it? It's not super believable that the shack gets this ruined.
Yeah.
And then this cleaned up by the end.
It gets this ruined like 150 times throughout the course of the series.
But like, normally we like the idea that if there's some kind of damage to something that lingers in the next episode, like the S falling off in Headhunters, this episode was like, we kind of had to break our own rule just to get a sense of stakes.
Yeah. Yeah, because we had it before where the shack wasn't getting destroyed, and it just didn't feel like
we had built to anything.
Yeah, it wasn't feeling like we were creating enough problems for the character. And also, yeah, like, you want an escalation of problems, and having a visual escalation of problems to go with that, to go with the story escalation.
Yeah, well, you're always trying to visualize it. Like, this beat of Mabel turning into Stan is pretty clear from the dialogue, but until the fez falls on her head and she sees it, it doesn't fully land that that's been the transformation.
Exactly. It's just like, it's clear just we're working through our own problems.
Yeah.
This episode.
Cash flood. I'm giving none of this to.
He's so gleeful about being the worst person in the world.
Yeah, I feel like that's how you can get away with him being such a jerk, is that he's having so much fun doing it.
Yeah, well, and I think that was something that I think was a little hard for people to understand in the writer's room at the beginning of the series, was that even though Stan is following a lot of these tropes of being, he's a miser, he's not grumpy.
Yeah,
like, he actually loves being himself.
Yeah.
He really, like, revels in it. Like, even though he's got, like, some kind of... He's got sorrow inside. His kind of day-to-day, like, he's more about just the uncle who loves to hear himself make dumb jokes than he is somebody who's mean or cruel or cynical per se.
Yeah. And that's something we tried to...
Am I a man? Am I a baby?
So there's a lot of good moments in this one.
Yeah,
we rarely think about this episode, but Question Baby, that's a Hall of Famer right there.
That's for you kids. We just called one of our own jokes a Hall of Famer. We've really
come on, Question Baby.
We've really lost it.
Come on, Question Baby. No, it's really stupid.
Yeah, no,
it's very lazy.
No, I think, as you can hear from these commentaries, that, you know, we have like legitimate. With every episode, there's like legitimate successes and failures, and that's one of the great things about TV. You can learn from your successes and failures so quickly. Where it's like, oh, there was an episode with this girl who was irredeemable, Pacifica. Maybe next time we'll try to give her more dimension. Yeah. Or, oh, you know, this episode didn't feel Gravity Fallsy enough. We'll try not to do that in the future.
Let's try to do an episode with more mystery, a greater focus on it. You know.
Do I look like an idiot, folks?
The word is gimme. 2 E's.
Ooh! You know, because you've gone this far, we're going to give you one more chance. Let's try again. It's a P word. Some might even say it's the magic word.
Abracadabra. Final answer.
I'm sorry, Stan, but the word is...
Please?
Apparently that word can make you money.
So wait, if you lost everything, then that means, Mabel, you won!
We did it!
Wait, what do we win again?
I remember this episode also kind of marked kind of the midpoint of the season, and TV production, particularly in animation, as you go further into the episodes start overlapping, which to the point where you're fixing the color in one episode while you're writing the other one.
Yeah.
And so we had a number of these episodes later in the season that were kind of lower stakes episodes because we were so busy trying to fix all the problems with the episodes in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
So that there's sort of like the episodes kind of get like kind of simpler, sillier, lower stakes. You know, some of them I think not our favorite episodes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we were like fixing the first half of the season.
Yeah.
This tends to happen in shows where as you go through, like you're navigating multiple things. You have to choose which episodes to focus the most on.
Yeah, and we tried to love up each one
Everyone.
as much as
Yes.
humanly possible. Like if an episode felt like it was bad, we're like, we have to give this one extra love because we don't want to turn out something that's. You never want to betray the audience. You always want to give them something.
Well, we're like grateful for their eyeballs on our show.
Yeah.
Like we want to care as much as we can, even if not every episode is like the most memorable one of all.
Totally.
What do you think?